He proposed to his backup singer at his wife's birthday party. His sister filmed it, laughing. His mother toasted the real woman. His wife clapped softly, eyes dry. What none of them knew, the record label printed on every check he cashed wasn't his. She'd built it, brick by silent brick. Now watch closely, because the woman of the hour didn't know she was about to become the joke of the night. The rooftop glowed gold that evening. String lights hung low over the city, and the whole skyline looked like it had dressed up just for her. Her name was Imani Bell, 40 years old that night, and every soul on that rooftop was there because of her, even if not one of them knew it. She had paid for all of it, the flowers, the lights, the quiet jazz trio in the corner. She did not tell a soul. That was just how Imani moved through the world, soft, steady, behind the curtain, never on the stage. Her husband stood across the room, laughing too loud, the way famous men learn to laugh. Marcus Bell. The whole city knew him as Marcus King, a voice like warm rain, a smile that sold out arenas. And tonight, on his wife's birthday, that smile was pointed at another woman. Her name was Simone, the backup singer, 26, sharp-eyed, draped in a long white dress that shimmered every time she moved. She stood close to Marcus, too close, and nobody at that party seemed to think it was strange. A few of the older guests noticed, though. An aunt here, a cousin there. They saw how Simone's hand kept finding Marcus's arm, and they saw how Imani kept her eyes soft and her chin level, and they leaned to one another and whispered. But whispering is not the same as saying, and nobody, not one person on that rooftop, walked over to stand beside the woman whose night it was. That is its own kind of betrayal, isn't it? The people who see and say nothing. Imani noticed. She always noticed. But she said nothing. She moved through her own party like a guest in it, refilling glasses she didn't need to refill, thanking people for coming to a night she had built. And the whole time, her thumb moved in slow circles over a small brass key that hung from a faded red ribbon on her wrist. You'll want to remember that key. We'll come back to it. Marcus's mother found Imani by the dessert table. Her name was Gloria, a big woman with a bigger opinion, and she had never once looked at Imani like a daughter. You should smile more tonight, Gloria said. It's a celebration. Try to keep up with the energy in the room. Imani smiled. Yes, ma'am. My son is on top of the world right now, Gloria went on, watching Marcus across the floor. A man like that needs a woman who shines, not one who hides in corners counting napkins. Imani said nothing. She just held that key a little tighter. Then came the sister, Renee, younger than Marcus, prettier than she was kind, and famous in her own small way for living off her brother's shine. She had her phone already up, already recording, already smiling at something Imani couldn't see yet. Sis, Renee said, and the word dripped. Stand over there by the cake you're gonna want to remember tonight. Why was she filming? Why was everyone watching the door like something was coming? Imani didn't ask. She walked to the cake, 40 candles, her own name written in icing, and she waited the way she had learned to wait her whole life. An old friend of Imani's passed her near the cake, a woman she'd known since school, one of the few real ones. The woman touched her arm. You good, girl? She asked quietly. You don't look right. I'm fine, Imani said, and she smiled the smile she'd been smiling all her life, the one that closed a door so gently you never heard the latch. Go enjoy yourself. Tonight's not about me. If only that had been a lie. Tonight was about to be very much about her, just not the way she had planned. Marcus tapped his glass with a fork. The room went soft and turned toward him. He had that pull, that gravity. People wanted to look at him, so they did. Family, he said. Friends, thank you for coming out tonight. He let the moment breathe. He was good at moments. Y'all know me. Y'all know my journey from nothing to the top. And a man doesn't climb that high without learning a few hard truths about who's really beside him. Imani's heart began to tap against her ribs. Slow, careful, like it already knew. For years, Marcus said, I told myself a partner is somebody who keeps the book straight, keeps the house quiet, and I'm grateful for that. I am. His eyes found Imani, and there was something almost gentle in them, which made what came next so much worse. But a king needs a queen who burns for the music, who feels what I feel, who lives in the fire with me. He reached out his hand, and Simone took it. Most of y'all know Simone, Marcus said. What y'all don't know is that I asked her to be my wife, and she said yes. The rooftop erupted, glasses lifted. People who had eaten Imani's food and stood under Imani's lights cheered for the woman standing beside Imani's husband, and Imani stood at her own birthday cake, 40 candles burning, and watched her marriage end in front of 200 people. Renee zoomed in, laughing. Got it, she whispered. Got it all. Gloria rose to her feet, lifted her glass high, and said the words that would echo in Imani's chest for a long, long time. Finally, a real woman. To the woman who matches my son. And Simone looked right at Imani, just for a second, and she smiled. No hard feelings, she said softly, just loud enough. Some people fund the dream. Some people live it. Now. Here is where everyone expected the wife to break. They expected screaming, a slap, a scene they could film and post and laugh about for weeks. They leaned in for it. Renee's camera waited for it. But Imani Belle did not scream. She set down her little plate. She looked at the man she had loved for 15 years, and she clapped. Softly, 3 times. Her eyes were dry, bone dry. Congratulations, she said. Just that, and she meant it like a blade means it. Then she turned to the catering manager near the stairs, a quiet man who had worked her events for years, and she said something nobody else caught over the noise. Hold the final invoice, I'll handle the rest personally. Nobody understood what that meant. Why would they? They thought she was the wife who got left. They had no idea she was the woman who owned the floor they were standing on. She walked to the elevator alone. No tears, no words, just the slow turn of a brass key against her wrist. They mistook her silence for surrender. But hear me now, and remember it. Quiet is not the same as weak. And what happened next? No one in that room saw it coming. To understand the woman in that elevator, you have to go back, way back, before the lights, before the label, before Marcus King was anybody at all. Imani grew up on a narrow street in a tired part of town, raised by her grandmother in a house that leaned a little to the left. Her grandmother's name was Pearl, and Pearl sewed for a living. Wedding dresses for women who could barely afford them, church suits, funeral clothes. Pearl's hands were always moving, always making something out of almost nothing. Baby, Pearl used to tell her, needle flashing in the lamplight, don't you let your mouth do your work for you. Build quiet. Let what you make speak when your voice can't. Imani took that into her bones. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but she watched everything and she remembered everything, and she had a mind that could see how things fit together. Where other people saw a mess, Imani saw a machine waiting to be built. Pearl raised her with 2 things, a needle and a Bible. And from both she pulled the same lesson over and over. You do the work in the quiet, baby. You do it when nobody's clapping. Because the clapping comes and goes, but the work is the thing that stays. Imani would lie awake some nights, listening to the soft scratch of her grandmother sewing in the next room, long after midnight, finishing a dress for a woman who'd never know how late Pearl stayed up to make her beautiful. That sound became the rhythm of Imani's whole life. The work nobody sees, the hands that never stop. She learned to give without needing the thank you. She thought that was a strength. And it was. But every strength, if you're not careful, becomes the exact door a thief walks through. Remember that. We'll see it again. She met Marcus when they were both young and broke and full of fire. He was singing for tips on a corner near the bus station, and he was good. Lord, he was good. A voice that could stop traffic, but a voice with nowhere to go is just noise the world walks past. Imani didn't walk past. She stopped. She listened, and she believed in him before a single other person on this earth did. She worked 2 jobs back then, days at a phone company, nights cleaning offices downtown, and every dollar she didn't spend on rent, she tucked away, not for herself, for him, for a dream he didn't even know how to chase yet. There was a little room above a barber shop, empty and dusty, with good bones and bad wiring. Imani saw a studio where everyone else saw a closet. She signed the lease herself. She bought the foam and the second-hand board and the one good microphone, and she stayed up till 2 in the morning learning how it all connected, because they couldn't afford to pay anyone who already knew. She built that room with her own hands, brick by brick, wire by wire. There were nights she fell asleep on that dusty floor with a soldering iron still warm beside her. Nights she watched videos until sunrise, just to understand how a signal traveled from a mouth to a microphone to a master. She broke things and fixed them and broke them again. Marcus would come by in the mornings, fresh from singing on his corner, and he'd find her there, gray with dust, and he'd say, "Baby, why you working so hard on a dream that's mine?" And she'd just smile and say, "Because it's gonna be ours." That was the word she always used. Ours. She never once said mine. Hold on to that. Because the day a man starts saying mine about a thing 2 people built, that's the day the ground starts shifting under a marriage. And when it was done, she handed Marcus a small brass key on a faded red ribbon. "This is yours now," she told him. "Go make something that lasts." But here is the part Marcus never understood. Here is the seed of everything that came after. Imani kept a copy of that key. And she kept something else too. She knew her man. She knew his pride. She knew that a proud, gifted, broke young black man who had been told no his whole life needed, more than anything, to feel like he had done it himself. To feel like a man who was carried would always feel like less. So Imani made a choice born out of love, though it would one day cut her deepest. She registered the company in her own name, her maiden name, quietly, through papers Marcus never read, because Marcus never read papers. She set it up so that to him and to the world, the label would always look like it came from somewhere else, an investor, a backer, a blessing from outside, never from the wife at the kitchen table. She did it so he could hold his head up, so he could believe the lie that lifts so many men. I built this myself, and he did believe it. He believed it all the way to the top. The studio above the barbershop became a real studio. The real studio became a label. The label found a sound, then a star, then a city, then a country. They called it a miracle. They called Marcus a self-made king. And what had started as a dusty closet above a barbershop grew into something worth more than every house on the block where Imani was raised, combined. A name on platinum records, a foundation under hundreds of careers, and the man whose face was on all of it still believed an outsider owned the ground beneath his feet. He never knew the truth. The owner he'd never met, the one whose signature made the whole machine run, was sleeping next to him every night. She gave him the key to everything. She just never told him whose hand it really belonged to, but the cracks were already forming. Because a man who believes he did it all alone eventually starts to believe He doesn't need anybody at all. After the birthday, Marcus did not come home. Not that night, not the next. And when he finally did, it wasn't to explain. It was to pack. Imani sat at the kitchen table in the dark, watching the man she'd built carry his bags toward the door, the same table where she'd once signed papers to give him a kingdom. "I didn't want it to happen like that," Marcus said. He didn't look at her. "But you and me, we've been over a long time. You feel it too. Don't act like you don't." "You announced your engagement at my birthday," Imani said quietly, "in front of your mother, in front of everybody." "That wasn't my idea," he muttered. "Simone thought it would be a clean break. A new chapter." Simone thought. There it was. Watch how a man stops being the author of his own life and starts being a passenger in someone else's plan. Because here is the truth about Marcus, and I want you to understand it, because it matters. He was not a monster. He was a frightened man wearing a crown. For years, a small voice had whispered to him in the quiet hours, "You didn't really do this. Somebody handed it to you. You're not a king. You're a kept man." He didn't know that voice was wrong about who. He just knew it shamed him. And Simone, clever, hungry Simone, had found that voice and learned to sing along with it. "You'll always be the wife who kept the lights on," she told him one night, draped across a hotel chair. "Don't you want to be more than that? Don't you want to know what you're worth without somebody propping you up? Drop the old team. Drop the dead weight. Build it clean. Yours." She said it like love. But Simone had grown up with nothing too, and she had learned a colder lesson than Imani ever did. She had learned that affection fades and beauty fades, but a name on a contract does not. She didn't want Marcus's heart. She wanted his throne, and she had decided the fastest way onto it was to convince the king to burn down everyone who remembered he hadn't built it. And here is the thing about Gloria you have to understand, because she was not just a cruel old woman for no reason. Gloria had been left once herself, long ago, by a man who walked out and never looked back. She had raised Marcus alone, on pride and pennies and the fierce belief that her boy would one day be too big to ever be left the way she was. So when she looked at Imani, quiet, plain, the kind of woman the world overlooks, she saw weakness. She saw the kind of woman a man outgrows. And she was determined her son would never be tied down by anything she thought looked small. She mistook Imani's softness for the thing that had broken her own life. She was wrong. But fear makes people sure of the wrong things. So the plot grew teeth. Gloria came to Imani's door with soft words and hard eyes. "Sign the divorce quiet," she said. "Walk away with your dignity. Let my son start fresh before the showcase. Don't embarrass yourself dragging this out. You were never really one of us anyway." "I gave 15 years to your son," Imani said softly. "And he gave you a name people know," Gloria shot back. "That's more than a woman like you would have ever had on her own. Be grateful and be gone." "A woman like you." Imani closed the door and stood with her back against it for a long time. How many times in her life had she heard those words? In one shape or another. A woman like you. Quiet, plain, behind the curtain. They had no idea. They had absolutely no idea. Renee posted the birthday video. It spread fast. Strangers laughed at the woman by the cake. Look at her face. Look how calm. Bet she knew she couldn't keep a man like that. They made jokes out of the worst night of her life, and Imani read every one of them in the dark. And something in her began to go out, like a light at the end of a long hallway, flickering. She stopped sleeping. She stopped eating much. She moved through her days like a woman underwater. The strong, steady Imani that everyone leaned on without thanking. She went numb. She started to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe she really was just the books, just the quiet one, just the woman who kept the lights on for a man meant to shine. Have you ever been there? That place where the lie gets repeated so many times you start to help it along, where you begin to do the bully's work for them, in your own head, in the dark. That's where Imani lived for those weeks. She'd catch her reflection and look away. She'd hear Marcus's voice in her memory, "A king needs a queen who burns." And she'd ask herself if she had ever burned at all, or if she had only ever been the wood that other people set on fire to keep warm. She didn't tell anyone how bad it got. Of course she didn't. The woman who carries everyone never learned how to be carried. That's the loneliest kind of strong there is. One night she sat on the floor of that first studio above the barber shop, the one nobody used anymore, holding the brass key in both hands. And she said it to herself the way you say a prayer you're scared has stopped working. Quiet is not the same as weak. A pause. Her voice cracked. Is it? She almost signed. The papers were right there. One signature and she could disappear. Let them have it all. Let the world keep laughing. She picked up the pen, and that is when the door opened. His name was Otis, an old engineer, gray at the temples, the first man Imani ever hired when the label was just a dream and a dusty room. He had watched her build all of it. He was the only person alive, besides Imani, who knew the whole truth, and he had not come empty-handed. He set a worn folder on the floor in front of her. Inside were the original papers, the registration, the deed to the company, the ownership documents with one name on every line, her name. And beneath the folder, a single old reel of tape, Marcus's very first song, the one they recorded together in this room, back when it was just the two of them and a borrowed microphone and a future they couldn't see. "You forgot something," Otis said gently. "You forgot who you are." Imani looked down at the papers, at her own name, written everywhere on everything. "They think they're taking it from you," Otis said. "But baby, they can't take what was never theirs to touch. You didn't marry into this. You didn't stumble into this. You made this, with these two hands, while he was learning to wave at crowds." And for the first time in months, Imani Bell stopped crying. She set down the pen. She picked up the key. And a woman who stops crying, let me tell you something, a woman who stops crying is a woman who has finally decided something. The label's anniversary showcase was the biggest night of the year. Everyone who mattered would be there. Investors, press, artists, cameras. The whole industry packed into one bright room to celebrate the empire of Marcus King. He planned to make it a coronation. He would perform. He would debut Simone, not just as his fiancée, but as the new face of the label. A new era, his era. The night he finally stepped out from behind whatever shadow he thought he'd been standing in. Simone wore white. Gloria sat front row, proud as a queen mother. Renee worked the room with her phone up, already filming the legend she thought she was watching get born. Nobody expected Imani to come. Why would she? The discarded wife, the quiet one, the joke from the birthday video. They had already written her out of the story. Then the doors opened, and Imani Bell walked in. She did not come in broken. She did not come in loud. She came in calm, certain, in a deep, quiet elegance that made the whole room turn without quite knowing why. She didn't rush. She didn't hide. She walked through that crowd of people who had laughed at her like she had all the time in the world, because in truth, she did. Now you've been asking yourself since the very first scene, why was she so calm at that birthday? Why didn't she break? Here is your answer. Watch. Marcus took the stage, spotlight on him the way he liked it. He pulled Simone up beside him and took the microphone. Tonight, he told the crowd, isn't just about how far we've come. It's about where we're going. Some people fund a dream. He smiled. He couldn't help the dig. But only one person lives it, Simone. This stage, this label, this future, it's ours. The applause started. And then a second voice came through the speakers, calm, even. carrying to every corner of that silent, fancy room. "Before anyone signs anything tonight," Imani said, "I think you should all meet the actual owner of this label." Heads turned. Imani stood at the side of the stage, a second microphone in her hand, that old folder under her arm. Marcus's smile froze halfway up his face. "Imani," he said, off mic, low and sharp. "What are you doing? Get down." She didn't get down. She walked up the steps, slow and steady, and she stood beside him in his own spotlight, and she was not afraid. "You've been telling this room a story for years, Marcus," she said, "about a man who built an empire from nothing. It's a beautiful story, I should know." She let that sit. "I wrote it." A murmur moved through the crowd. She lifted her wrist, and there it was, the small brass key on its faded red ribbon, catching the light. "You all see this little key?" she said to the room. "There's a studio above a barber shop on the east side. One room, bad wiring. That's where this whole thing started. I signed that lease, I bought that microphone. I built that room with my own 2 hands, while this man was singing for change on a corner." She turned to Marcus, and her voice never rose, not once. "Everything you have ever cashed opened with this key. I gave you a copy. I kept the original, and I kept a great deal more than that." "That's a lie," Gloria called out from the front row, but her voice shook. It was Otis who answered. He stepped to the front, the old engineer, and he nodded to the technician in the booth, and the giant screen behind the stage lit up. The documents, the registration, the deed, the ownership papers of the entire label, and on every single line, one name. Not Marcus, not a mysterious investor, not a backer from outside. Her name. The room read it together, slow and then all at once. You could feel it move through the crowd like a wave. The investors leaned forward. The press lifted their cameras. Simone's white dress suddenly looked like a costume she'd worn to the wrong party. "This is the truth you've been waiting for since the first minute. There was never any outsider. The owner Marcus had never met. The one whose signature ran the whole machine had been sleeping beside him for 15 years. "Every royalty check you ever signed," Imani said quietly. "Every platinum record on that wall, the masters, the catalog, the name itself. I hold all of it, and with one signature tonight, I decide what happens to every last piece, including the part with your face on it." She wasn't talking about money to be cruel. She was telling him what he'd refused to see. He hadn't lost a backer. He had lost the ground under his feet. The whole towering thing he called himself had been standing on her the entire time, and he had been too proud to look down. Marcus stared at the screen, at the name. He opened his mouth, and nothing came out. The king with no kingdom. And watch his face now, because this is the part that matters. It wasn't only the empire he was losing in that moment, it was the story, the one he'd told himself every single morning to get out of bed and face the world. "I did this. I climbed out alone. I am a self-made man." That story had been the floor under his feet his whole adult life, and he was watching it crack open in front of 200 people who'd come to crown him. The fear he'd carried in secret all those years, the whisper that said you didn't really do this, turned out to be the only true thing about him. And the cruelest part? He'd burned down the one person who had ever loved him enough to let him believe the lie. He hadn't been carried by a stranger. He'd been carried by his wife, and he had thrown her away to feel tall. "You wanted to feel self-made," Imani said, and here, finally, something flickered in her eyes. Not rage, something heavier, pity. "I gave you that. For 15 years, I let you feel like a man who did it alone, because I loved you, and because I thought that's what love was supposed to do. Make yourself small so he could feel tall." She shook her head, slow. "So go on, make yourself, from nothing, the way I once did, for you." She set the microphone down on the stool beside him. Gently, like setting down something already dead. And the room? The room did not erupt this time. Nobody cheered, nobody laughed. Simone took one small step away from Marcus. Pure instinct. The way you step back from a man on fire so the flames don't catch your dress. Gloria's proud toast died unspoken in her throat. And Renee slowly lowered the phone she'd been filming with, because some moments a person knows deep down they should not be holding a camera for. Imani turned and walked off that stage the same way she'd walked in, calm, unhurried, whole. She never raised her voice, not once. She didn't have to, but the fall. Oh, the fall had only just begun. You want to know what karma looks like? It doesn't always come with thunder. Sometimes it comes quiet, like a tide going out, taking everything that was never nailed down. By the end of that week, the empire of Marcus King belonged, on paper and in fact, to the woman he'd thrown away at her own birthday. The masters, the catalog, the royalties, the brand built on his name, all of it answered to her signature now, and her signature alone. The investors who had come to bless the new era quietly closed their folders and went home. You don't put your weight behind a man who didn't know. He didn't own the building he was standing in. Overnight, Marcus King went from the self-made king of the industry to a cautionary tale people whispered about at parties, the man who got exposed at his own showcase, the man who never read the papers. And Simone? Simone did exactly what Simone was always going to do. She came to him in that big empty house a few nights later, and she didn't even bother to soften it. "I can't do this," she said, already gathering her things. "I came here for a future. There's no future here anymore." "You said you loved me," Marcus said, and for the first time he sounded young. He sounded like the boy on the corner singing for change. Simone paused at the door, and she gave him back his own life in one cold sentence. "Love doesn't keep the lights on, Marcus." She glanced around the dim, echoing house. "And right now, yours are off." Then she was gone. She had wanted a throne. She had never wanted him, and now there was no throne to want. Gloria came next, and the hard woman who had toasted a real woman at her son's wife's birthday had no toasts left. The famous son she'd bet everything on was a punchline. The daughter-in-law she'd called never really one of us had turned out to own the very ground the family had been strutting across for years. The neighbors who used to ask Gloria for autographs from her son now crossed the street. Pride is an expensive house to live in, and Gloria's was being repossessed in front of everyone she'd ever looked down on. She came to Imani once too, older suddenly, smaller, the fierceness gone out of her. "I judged you wrong," she admitted, the words clearly costing her everything. "I thought you were weak." Imani looked at her for a long moment. "No, ma'am," she said. "You thought quiet meant weak. That was your mistake. It was never mine." And she let the old woman stand with that truth, the way Gloria had once let Imani stand alone at her own party. Renee deleted the birthday video, but the internet doesn't forget, and now the comments had turned. People had found out the truth. That's the woman who built the whole thing, and they laughed at her. The clip Renee had filmed to humiliate Imani became the clip that crowned her. Renee had recorded her own family's downfall and posted it with a laughing caption. She would never live that down. And Marcus sat alone in the house, holding nothing. He came to see Imani once. He found her at the old studio above the barber shop, of all places, the room where it all began. He stood in the doorway like a stranger. "I don't know how to start over," he admitted. His voice was rough. "I don't know who I am without all of it." Imani looked at him for a long moment, and here is where you learn what kind of woman she truly was, because she could have crushed him. She held every card. She could have left him with absolutely nothing, and the whole world would have called it justice. She didn't. "You still have your voice," she said. "That part was always yours. Nobody gave you that. I never touched it." She let one small mercy fall, clean and deliberate, a single thread he could pull himself up by if he had the humility to grab it. "You can still sing, Marcus, but you're going to have to do it as a man this time. Not a king, a man. From the bottom, honest." It was more than he deserved, and they both knew it. Revenge would have been loud. Imani chose something heavier. She chose to walk away whole, and to let him keep just enough rope to either climb or hang himself, by his own hand, for once. She didn't gloat, she didn't celebrate. She kept the people who'd stayed loyal, Otis chief among them, and she set about rebuilding the thing she'd always quietly run, only now in the open, as herself, with her own name on the door for all the world to see. And the man who once announced he didn't need her stood in the doorway of the room she built and finally, 15 years too late, understood exactly what he had thrown away. Some time passed, the kind of time that heals if you let it. You'll find Imani back where this story really started, the little studio above the barber shop. She bought the whole building. She didn't tear that first room down. She kept it exactly as it was. Bad wiring fixed, but everything else the same. The foam on the walls, the second-hand board, the one good microphone. And on the wall, in a simple frame, she hung the brass key on its faded red ribbon, the first brick, honored at last, not hidden anymore, not a secret a man could take credit for, just the truth, framed in the light for anyone who walked in to see. She was not bitter. That's the part I need you to hear. She did not spend her new life angry. Anger is a house too, and she had decided not to live in it. Instead, she did something with all that hard-won wisdom. She found a young girl from the neighborhood, a girl with a big voice and no way to be heard, the way Marcus once had no way to be heard. And Imani opened the door for her. She taught her the music and the business both. She made sure that girl would never have to hide behind anybody, never have to make herself small so somebody else could feel tall. She taught her to build, yes, but to build with her name on it from the very first day. "Sign your own papers," Imani told her, smiling. "Read every line, and never ever let anybody convince you that the quiet work isn't the real work." The girl looked up at her. "Weren't you scared?" she asked. "When they all laughed at you, when you lost everything?" Imani thought about that for a moment. "I didn't lose everything," she said. "I lost the people who never really saw me. And baby, that's not losing. That's the storm doing your cleaning for you." She tapped the frame on the wall, the little brass key inside it. "I kept the only thing that was ever truly mine, the work of my own two hands. They can take a marriage. They can take a name off a building. They can't take what you built when nobody was watching. And Marcus, you might be wondering, he took the one mercy she left him. Word came around, months later, that he was singing again. Small rooms, no spotlight, no crown, just a man and a voice starting over honest from the bottom, the way she'd told him he'd have to. Maybe he'd make something real this time. Maybe he wouldn't. But that was his road to walk now, and his alone. Imani had finally stopped carrying him. And you know what? She felt lighter than she had in 15 years. That was Pearl's lesson all those years ago in the lamplight, needle flashing, build quiet. Let what you make speak when your voice can't. It had carried Imani through the darkest night of her life. Now she was handing it forward, like a key, to a girl who would never have to learn it the hard way. So what's the lesson in all of this? Let me leave you with it plain. A woman's silence is not her weakness. It is where she keeps her power until the world is finally ready to feel it. They will underestimate the quiet ones every time. They will mistake patience for surrender and stillness for nothing at all. And every time, they will be wrong. Imani Bell stood at the window of the room she built, watching her city go gold in the evening light, the same light from that rooftop a lifetime ago. Only this time nobody was laughing. This time everybody finally knew her name. She touched the framed key on the wall, and she smiled, soft and sure. Quiet is not the same as weak. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you were just the one behind the scenes, this story was for you. Imani didn't shout, she built. And in the end, the silence she carried became the loudest thing in the room. If her strength moved you, do something for her. Hit that like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, should she have given Marcus a second chance, or did he deserve to lose it all? I'm reading every reply, and I'll see you in the next story.